Welcome to the Dice Tower. I'm Wendy Yi.
And I'm Chris Yi.
And today we will be reviewing Rise.
Rise!
Rise up, rise to the day. You know the song, right?
I do not know any pop music since 1987.
Okay, well that goes through my head every time I talk about this title.
This game looks like it came out in 1887. This is a game from Capstone Games, which I like a lot of their stuff. This has a cover that we have gone on record as making fun of before.
I think it's the best cover ever. I'm pretty sure the people in the clouds have all died.
I still stand by the fact that this is not a cover that sells this game because the cover looks so different from what's actually inside the box. I understand that this is an artistic representation of sort of the industrial revolution, and you might get something from that if the back of the box and the rulebook didn't explain the story as you are an important person in a city. And I'm not even exaggerating about that. They did not try to make this sound thematic. This is not named like Brussels or
right.
Or Paris or something like that. This is like, yo, run a city, the tracks game.
Generic city, enter name here.
That being said, we're going to show you how it plays, then we're going to give you our thoughts.
That we shall. This is Rise. This is a tracks game, so each one of these boards is its own unique track. This is the action selection track, and the goal of all of this is to get victory points. So we start out with 15 and move up and so forth. Now, the way that a round goes is this right over here. You gain income, you reset the cards in the lineup, so these will change every time. You place your factories out, choosing which action you're going to take. Then you'll go ahead and fire off all of the actions and the events left to right. And then finally, any end of round bonuses that may happen like this, like the person with the most gets a point. I want to spend the most time talking about this action track because this is definitely the most unique out of all the tracks that are going on. This is the action selection. You'll choose in action order where you want to go. There are bonuses if you happen to choose adjacently below someone. They get to flip over a little tile and take a bonus action. But you'll pay the cost at the top immediately when you place, and then we'll fire off all of these cards left to right. So no one took this first action, so nobody is going to take anything here. However, in between each one of the actions, there's events. If you pass an event, then everybody who passes it gets to take it. So for example, this one is a coin or a victory point. Every single player gets this bonus right now. Then we move on to the next action. Now blue will take their action. They can choose the top one for free, or they can pay additional money to take the bottom one. And these just let you move up on tracks for this particular action. Then we go to the next event. Now red and yellow get to take this event, which lets them move up on this little school track. Then we move over to red and they take their action. Once again, they can get the cheaper one or the more expensive one. Then finally, only yellow gets this particular action right here, or event right here. This lets them flip over book and take one of their little free things. This is also the same books that you spend when you are lower than somebody, but these are just little free actions that you get. And then finally, they take their action. As you take your actions, it will move you up on all of these other different tracks that are going on the board. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. Let's go ahead and start on the left over here. So we have the school track right here. This you're just moving straight up. And as you move up, you get to choose which token that you want to have. These are just the little bonuses that you get when people give them to you. You can only use them if they're face up. So you want a few of them because you're going to use a few and then you'll eventually get to reset if you're given that option. This down here is the press track, and what you're going to do is you're going to follow these little white arrows here. You will move down a track every single time you get a movement, but once you reach the last space that's surrounded in black, you'll move back to the middle, and then you can choose a different track to move on later. Up here we have culture. This is how you move up on the satisfaction track. Basically, you're entertaining people and they like it. This just gives you a lot of bonuses of movement. The hat track down here, well, I call it the hat track. I guess it's the politics track. This one, actually, you move up on it, and it's going to be worth the amount of points based on the little numbers in the bottom. Down here is research. This lets you move a lot on other tracks. So as you're researching things, you get to move up, hey, look, I know a little bit more about school or a little bit more about the press. This is the bank track. On one side, it's basically just money that you directly get, but on this side, it's also discounts on cards. So as you move up your money, you take advantage of people, and they get less satisfaction, so they get a little bit angrier at you for stealing all their money. This is the bureau track. This right here, as you move forward, you don't get the benefits, but then finally when you decide to move back, you will get whatever benefit of whatever space you are on. This industry track right here is the biggest way to get income. Everyone starts with 1 income, but as you kill more trees, you can increase the amount of victory points and the amount of coins that you get at the beginning of each round. This right here is the conservation track. This is one of the 2 tracks where you have to keep a balance. If you move too far down into the negative, you start losing actions or you start losing opportunities. Whereas if you move up and stay in the green instead of the red, nothing really bad happens to you. The other one is over here. This is the satisfaction track. As people raise their fists at you in anger, you lose points at the end of the game. But also you can gain really big positive points if people are very happy with your service and how you are doing in your city. So that's a gist of how the tracks and all the game works. You're going to be playing through all the cards. After you've completed all of the cards, then you see whoever has the most points, and that person is the winner.
So aside from the cover that, like I said, I've made fun of, it's kind of the spooky spectral thing going on, I think that the game actually looks pretty decent once it's set up. It looks like an old school Euro game almost, right?
I was like, it looks very Euro-y. It's all a bunch of tracks. It's individual boards, which annoyed me at first because I was like, why is this not just a game board? But it's because every side is different, so you can mix and match the A and B sides, and I appreciate that.
Baby. Yeah, no, I agree, for sure,
Yeah.
right? You want to mix these things. Oh, I have a favored side between the A and B. I'll just use the B side on this one always. Whereas these other ones, I don't mind swipping and swapping and stuff in between. I think that's not bad, right? That adds to the variability. But we'll come back to if we feel like it does that add to replayability? Because that's a discussion. Is variability the same as replayability? And as neat as it is to have different tracks and stuff, A and B sides, I don't feel like it's, especially some of the tracks, you're like,
they don't feel that different, and I think that that's the thing.
You could convince me that there wasn't an A and B side on one of the tracks, like the one that you get to the end and you immediately go back to the beginning, and there's like the 4 different paths. Like, oh, the symbols are laid out in a slightly different fashion.
Or even like the research track, you just get different benefits. You research different things.
Right. So let's start with, did you have a...
I was going to say, let's start with thematicness.
That's where I wanted to go, actually.
What? Great minds think alike. Also, greater minds just think.
Also, every word of this review has been scripted already.
100%. So, thematically, you're a person in a city, building up city.
You said the line wrong.
I said it wrong.
I'm kidding.
What?
Don't script things.
Okay. So, all of these tracks are thematic in the sense that they mean something. You do research, you get to move up on a bunch of different other tracks because you researched more into political savviness, you researched more into saving the trees. You know what I mean? Like, so each one of the tracks has a theme.
They do. The education track gives you more of those book tokens, which you can activate when other players, go to the left of you and stuff. That stuff like that is really neat, right?
People get angry when you are a finance banker and you steal all their money.
If you want to build up the industry, then you're like chopping down the ecology or cutting down the trees and stuff.
Yeah.
So you got to work on balancing, your public favor and the trees and just the environmental impacts of like building up a ton of factories right next to people's houses and stuff. It makes them unhappy. I like that idea. The political track gives you points and gives you little bonuses and stuff. The entertainment track makes the masses happy.
Yes, they like you and you get very popular because you're entertained.
So all of these individual tracks, for the most part, have some nice thematic flavoring to them.
Yeah.
That being said, it still doesn't feel thematic. It still feels like a bone-dry, wow, you are, as you said, an important person in a city doing a thing.
Moving tracks. So I did research. Great. Why did this particular step in research be to help me save the plants versus the other one that helped me move up on the newspaper track?
Yeah.
I don't really feel the movement of like, ooh, I'm progressing in research. I'm just like, I'm moving up on other tracks.
Right. That being said, I love tracks in games.
Yes.
Right? When this was laid out in front of me and I was like, there's like 10 tracks I can move up. Tracks that let me move on other tracks. That let me move, sacrifice on this track to get up on a few spaces on this track and get more income and money and stuff. It has a very clever little action selection mechanism. I love the idea that you push further ahead, you got to pay more, but you trigger more of those events.
I really think that action selection mechanism is very interesting, and I think that's a lot of fun.
And people are going to focus like, oh, this is like, 400 tracks on the table. I think that action selection thing with the cards that come out is really clever, and that's kind of that to me is the soul of this game. Ironically, because you would expect the focus to be the tracks.
To be the tracks. Yeah, I just think that it's very interesting, that push and pull of, do I want to move further so that I can get more of these events? And sometimes those events let you pay for upgraded actions later. So do I want to push through that, or do I want to get something early because each one of those cards is rated the same? So you're essentially spending more money to get a not better card. I mean, they age up as you go, but that's what's so interesting to me is like, why do I want to spend 3 coins to move over here? It's those events. Mm-hmm. And if they're good, sometimes they're bad. And that's such a give and take.
Also, and people say there's no interaction in this game, which is not true because, once again, going back to the soul of the game, that action selection, I don't want to put my piece on the same space that Wendy's at and let her get a free book flip action, get a free bonus action. Am I willing to pay the extra coin to go further? Or am I willing to take a lesser amount of events and maybe take an action that's not as preferable because I don't want to give her that? But there's plenty of times where I'm like, fine, take it, because I do need that space.
I honestly usually just take what's best for me.
Right.
It's rare that I'm like, oh, I will take a suboptimal turn so you don't get a flip.
But you might choose differently between 2 very good options.
That's true.
So there's enough there. And in a 2-player variant, which I found works really well, if you're at all to the left or on the same space of the other player, they get to flip one of the book tokens. Mm-hmm. That's an easy way to scale this game down, and I think that works really well. I unfortunately, I keep calling this action selection thing the soul of the game because I do find ultimately, as fun as the tracks are, they do feel a bit soulless.
What do you mean by soulless?
I mean, the analogy that I think of is like, there's a statue that you admire that looks really cool, right? Growing up in Las Vegas, for example, there's these really ornate casinos. They have cool statues and stuff. And then one day you realize, like, oh, that's just styrofoam with kind of like a nice lacquer over the top.
Like a cement and then, fanciness over it.
Right. Or literally styrofoam. Like, the tracks are cool and I love moving up them. But at some point, playing this game a few times, like, It's not as exciting as it should be continually. It has a little bit of the move up this track, well, as you move up other tracks, it kind of feels like a roll and write. So maybe that's the thing, is that I have seen this combo-tastic thing happen in other games. It's happened even in Ganshan Clever.
Sure, Ganshan Clever is honestly what I first think of when I play this, when it comes to that. That's interesting that you feel like it's soulless, because I feel like this adds quite a bit to the art behind design, like board game design. Like, really? I haven't seen a game that is just focused on tracks before. And I don't think that it's groundbreaking. I don't feel like it, is suddenly like, this is the way we'll play this game and we will now have 50 iterations of just track games. But I really appreciate that this took a mechanism and it like dove into it and it was like, what can we do if all we do is tracks? And I like that. I appreciate that part of game design.
I like it and I respect it, but I do feel like there's a spark that's missing, right? This soul, this spirit I keep speaking of. Where, like, for example, moving up the research track, like the science, it doesn't feel like science to me because it's just, hey, this track lets you move up on other tracks, which is what so many of the other tracks do. The politics track feels like that. The entertainment track, yes, it focuses a little bit more on happiness, but also it feels like that. Some of the tracks feel very similar to each other, and I can't help but think, as I'm moving up science, I'm like, I wish this were more like Seven Wonders Duel. I wish this were more like some other games where science meant something a little different, maybe a set collection or a card engine that I can kind of add. And you are right that this game is it leans into the gimmick of everything's a track. And I like tracks. But I do think that this game would rise from a good game to like a really great game if it was just a bit more rounded. I like the tracks. I like them a lot.
Interesting.
But that's the thing. I do feel like something is missing for that real replayability, for that real pull to draw me back in and play it more.
Interesting. And I wonder, because I had thought about, like, what if you added in a couple modules or if a couple boards you could pull in and take out, but then they wouldn't interact the way they do together if you did something like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I pondered on that. So what would you give it a score as your soulless track game?
Score-wise, here's the thing, that I still really like it. And I have a lot of fun with it. And this has more plays in it left for me. But so score-wise, I'm giving this a 7.5. Because I really do like it. I have a lot of fun every time I play it. I find that the action selection system is novel, is really fun feeling, and I like triggering events. I like getting really good movement, and I love tracks. That being said, I do wish that I do wish that there was a little bit more going on outside of the tracks, because at some point late in the game you do kind of look at and go, yeah, this person's got the game because they're ahead on more of these tracks that kind of matter at the end. Mm-hmm. I had a good run. I had fun playing it. But I do wish there was something a little bit more surprising and dynamic from it. So 7.5 for me.
That's still a really good score. I thought it was going to be a little bit lower with the way you were talking about its soullessness. It's because all the souls were sucked out into the cloud on the cover. That's what happened.
Point taken.
So I'm going to give this an 8 because I really enjoy the tracks. I love that very roll and righty feel of what I do this so I can do this so I can do this so I can do this. It does almost get away from me, though. And I do have to put that caveat there, that if that is something that gets confusing for you, there is no way to track other than on your own fingers and toes all the stuff that you've done. So, for example, the last time that we played, I had 3 movement on the research/science track. So I moved 1, which then let me move on 2 other tracks, which let me move on another track and another track. And I was like, okay, I did that. Step 2,
Step 2 back to the first track.
Back to the original track that we were doing. So
you got 2 more of those. Yeah.
There's definitely those processes that you have to follow. Even the turn structure and the way that it works, you have to follow the processes so you don't miss stuff, because it is possible to miss things. So that's a little caveat in there. But for a soulless, not trackless Euro, I really enjoyed what was going on. I thought it was a lot of fun, and the way that the tracks interconnect, and especially that action selection with the events. I just think that was really fascinating. There's some tightness to it, but also just so much openness, and so I love that combination that's going on.
All right, so there you go. That's our thoughts on Rise from Capstone Games. A game, like I said, both of us definitely enjoyed and would recommend, but like I said, if you're looking for something more novel, you might not be finding it here necessarily, but what there is, really well-made game.
It's good stuff. Well, thanks for coming to the Dice Tower today. I'm Wendy Yi.
And I'm Chris Yi.
And rise on up.